Before I get started today, I'm going to kick off with a little bit of an anecdote. And as you listen to this anecdote, please bear in mind that my parents are sitting right here in the front row. The summer I turned 22, I had a few friends over at my parents' house while they were out of town to celebrate my birthday. Hi, Mom and Dad. And after everybody had left, I scrubbed that house until it looked like Mr. Clean himself had been there with a ShamWow and a bottle of OxyClean. And to my credit, when my folks walked in the door, my mom did comment that the house is actually cleaner than it was when they had left, which is a rarity for me. But after a few minutes of talking to them about their trip, my dad suddenly stopped and he looks at me and he says, "So, how was the party?" And I got that really creeped out feeling that we all get when we're about 6 and your parents are calling you by your full name. You know you've done something wrong, but you're not quite sure what it is yet. But being an adult now and an honors student, I decided I did not want to repeat the same mistake twice. So I asked him, "How did you know?" And do you know what he said? "I Googled it." Seriously, my dad Googled my party. That's parenting in the 21st century. As the Chancellor pointed out, my topic today is Facebook life in the Google world. My emphasis today is on the two words that I feel are really most central to the prompt, these being life and world. I'm going to talk about how the internet and the digital age has reshaped the way that we relate to each other, and perhaps most importantly, how we fundamentally relate to the knowledge that humanity has collected and placed on the internet. But before I hit the globe, I'd like to talk about us, the internet generation. My mother likes to tell stories about how when she was a little girl, growing up in California, she could take public transportation with strangers downtown to just putz around in the city with the expectation that she was supposed to be home by nightfall. What's interesting about this is that before the cellular age, no internet generation junkie will ever have had this experience. We were raised as a generation to be afraid of skinning our own knees, taught to never bike farther from our driveways or farther from our houses than the end of our own driveways, and told most emphatically not to talk to strangers. However, as social beings, we need to grow and mingle with strangers in order to have an interchange of ideas with minds that are foreign to our own. So I posit that we were told growing up not to talk to strangers, and now we place private information on the internet for everybody to see and look at. Social networking is my generation's cultural reaction. It is our way of reaching out, of creating our self-image by sharing ourselves with the world that we have been meticulously and cautiously sheltered from. And I'd like to talk briefly about my favorite manifestation of behavior that stems directly from social networking that I feel is really unique among the internet generation. Facebook stalking. Thank you. If you don't know what Facebook stalking is, or you're curious about this phenomenon, it can be essentially defined as procrastination by looking at pictures of or reading about your friends on the internet when you should be doing something productive. And I love it. I love it when my friends come up to me and tell me that they've wasted hours surfing the internet. Because the internet generation is a generation filled with incredibly busy people. I mean, just to get into TCU, we needed high GPAs, high standardized test scores, varsity sports, instruments. We had to do all of these things and even try to obtain the nigh unobtainable, etc. And we're so busy, but ironically, we're pretty much addicted to Facebook. And saying that we're addicted to Facebook is kind of like saying that a gambler has problems with horses. Our problem is not the horse, our problem is what we get out of the experience. So I'm proud to say that our problem is not Facebook. It's each other. We are so busy that we would rather look at each other or read about each other than do anything productive when we ought to be doing homework. So, as such, I like to think that every hour wasted on Facebook is just an indicator that we still care. And so we wisely... That was not a joke. Do we really care? On that note, we've wisely spent our time sharing our information with the internet. We've given freely of ourselves. We've posted our hopes and our dreams, our current statuses, and our problems all in one place. But we of the internet generation are very big believers in fair exchanges. So now we expect something greater in return. It's my belief that our information on the web is just a microcosm in a much larger and more fundamentally profound free information movement. Times Person of the Year in 2006 was you. which was a direct citation of the thousands of people who have given countless man-hours to create internet e-phenomena such as the blogosphere, YouTube, and Wikipedia. The web is kind of like the godchild of Gutenberg's printing press and Schrodinger's cat. When you print something on it, there are as many copies as there are observers. And the interesting thing about this is we are now all printing things on the web. We're reaching out and we're not waiting for permission or for orders from a higher authority to do so. See, the web began as a collection of very simple gifts of tiny little how-to websites and has since grown to include countless social sharing, massive internet phenomena. But what's interesting about this is that while the websites have grown, what we expect to pay for them has stayed the same. The internet generation gets disgruntled when we're asked to pay for anything on the web. We want the entire world delivered in 3D with paperless billing, shipped to our doorsteps, and we won't sign the UPS guy's clipboard when it gets there. Although we may make an exception if it's digital. Point being is that we no longer need the institution to deliver when we can give each other things on our own. Peer-to-peer file sharing is threatening the recording industry. Open source software is assaulting Microsoft's hold on the software industry. And Skype is threatening the telecommunications industry. Wikipedia, I truly feel, is already beginning to replace most world-known major encyclopedias because we've delivered free information. We've delivered free messaging. And we've delivered free entertainment. You could go to Hollywood and buy a movie ticket, or you could join the 77 million people who've taken joy in watching a Swedish baby laugh on YouTube. It's a 60-second clip of a child giggling. You see, I like to call this social sharing phenomenon global grassroots. It's the internet oxymoron. And global grassroots has given us an expectation that is driving our demand for a web-based world. And the market economy is struggling to keep up with us. Our entire society is scrambling to keep up. All of the information that is used to run our complicated lives, from social networking to social security, from private lives to private enterprise, is being systematically digitized. And it's really a profound yet scary leap. Consider this. When you surf the web, everything that you see is completely man-made. If the US went up like Pompeii tonight, you could dig all the computers you wanted to out of the ashes, but the internet would instantly become an item of legend. You see, I liken it to when ancient man first realized that his life was so complicated, he had to start poking holes in clay in order to keep track of it all. Our means of keeping track of our lives, of keeping organized, and of staying connected have outpaced our ability to do so on paper. And because of this, we're going to need to live and breathe this technology until it becomes seamlessly integrated with our lives. Now, what do I mean by seamless integration? I mean that this technology is growing literally, physically, and semantically smaller. For example, my desktop computer is eventually going to lose its top and just become a desk. My username on the web is going to ditch the name, and I'm just going to be a user, because what's in the name when the internet is already going to know who you are? And the World Wide Web is going to ditch a lot of excess and just become the world, because the internet generation does not want to be wireless. We don't even want to be wired more, we just want to be wired. Let me tell you about some of the technologies that I feel are really driving this change. The first one is a desktop without the top. It's a desk, it's about the size of a drafting table, and it's a massive touchscreen computer that is capable of sensing up to 10 independent points of contact on its surface, which means that I can interact with data on my screen in a very intuitive manner that beats out the old keyboard and mouse method. When I'm done working in this document, I can shrink it and push it up into the corner. And when I want to look at pictures of my family, I can scatter them over my desk like a literal pile of pictures and sort through them with my hands, shrink them, zoom in and zoom out, and move them around until my desktop is literally covered with excess loved ones. And what's fascinating about this, it's true. And what's fascinating, well, it's like the Minority Report, except for instead of Tom Cruise, it's for kids. Which is the same thing. But and what's even more incredible is that by the year 2015, we're expected to have what's called human-level linguistic user interfaces, which means we're going to be able to talk to our computers like it's another person. It's going to be just like Star Trek, except instead of calling our computers computer, we'll call it something a little bit more user-friendly, like Al, for the guy who invented the internet, or Fred, because Mr. Rogers is really an incredibly genuine, disarmingly charming fellow. And the day will come when the way that we interact with computers will fundamentally permeate and change society. I really look forward to when elementary students will quit crumpling up wads of paper to chuck at each other for kicks in class, because it's going to be a lot more fun to crumple up big wads of data and watch it splatter all over your classmate's desk. And he's going to look at you and say, I was just studying Argentina, but Egypt has exploded everywhere, and Eva Peron is fighting with Cleopatra, and I've always been terrified of coming between strong women. And if nobody in your elementary school gets the joke, your computer will laugh because he's polite. Now, I'd like to talk about another technology that I feel is really driving this change. It's a technology that's being developed by MIT right now as we speak, and it was just announced at a TED conference a couple months ago. It's a small electronic device about the size of a digital camera. You wear it around your neck, and in it has a camera, a digital camera, a projector, and a device that communicates with your cell phone, and through your cell phone, the internet. And it's called the sixth sense. Because just like your senses take in information about your environment to help influence the decisions you make in everyday life, the sixth sense takes information off the internet and puts it in your fingertips to influence the decisions you make in everyday life. So for example, if I were to go to the grocery store tonight and pull a roll of paper towels off the shelf, I could look at that paper towel and the computer would see it, recognize it, and compare it to other purchases I've made in the past, and then make a recommendation about whether or not it thinks I will like those specific paper towels. And it'll look at the paper towels I'm holding and say, I'll probably prefer a cheaper single-ply product to a triple-ply Bounty, unless I'm trying to clean my parents' house. Which point, I'll need a heavier product. But the point is that this technology is going to let us interact with the collective knowledge of humanity on an everyday basis and in a very intuitive way. It has a lot of other means for us to interact with it. For example, if I show it my wrist and draw a circle on my wrist, it projects a clock onto it and shows me the time. Flip over my hand, it'll project a calculator onto my hand so I can punch in calculations on the go. If I get lost in a city, I can walk up to any wall and it'll project my current location onto the wall. And if I want to, I can take a picture right now of all the academia sitting in front of me, using this iconic gesture for taking a picture. And it'll snap a photo. And later on tonight when I go home, I can show that picture to my friends just by standing in front of any flat surface. And in a slightly more controversial feature of the technology, it can pick faces out of that picture. And then transit those faces to Wikipedia, or show me your Facebook account or your blog and give me keywords about things that you've done, like ratemyprofessor.com. So this technology will allow us to interact with the internet on an everyday basis. Now take this a step further. If the internet can recognize an object for what it is, how long before it can recognize a person? How long before the web knows who I am and what data belongs to me, what money is mine, and where I live, and what it is that I do on a day-to-day basis? The laws of physics dictate that this is the body that I have that takes up space and reality. But how long before a computer recognizes that this is my data that I take up on the internet, before the documents that I use in everyday life become the air that I breathe? Because the line between that which is real and that which is digital is going to become so fine that we will eventually not be able to discern the difference until we reach out to touch it. And that is because we are in the midst of a paradigm shift. A shift, consider this. I've had 3 different physical addresses in the past 4 years, but I've only had 1 Facebook page, and I've only had 1 telephone number. And that's because in the quantum age, we have shirked the Newtonian notion of location in an absolute framework of time and space. We no longer seek to find each other based on where we stay. We seek each other where we are going to be and move and counter to each other. I'm not going to come knocking on your door or write you a letter, because I can send text to the palm of your hand. And I can place my ear, or I can place my voice literally in your ear. Because talking to someone today and seeing someone is just as easy as saying, I miss you. And when we are linked that closely, the technology will cease to be a means of communication that is clouded with barriers, because it will become just as effective and authentic as talking to someone is face to face. Now take a step back. I've talked about the world, or I've talked about life and how the internet is changing how we live our lives. Now I'm going to talk about how the internet is going to change the way the world interacts with everybody else. I believe that governments can work really hard to connect governments, but it takes people to connect people. And global problems require global focus in order to be solved, and democratic governments cannot address long-term global issues when their people get bored of those issues and wander off to think about something else. But it is my belief that the internet is the engine that is going to shrink the world and present the plight of our fellow men to people on a very fundamental level, because we're already beginning to form casual relationships with people all over the world. For example, I learned to make Thai fried rice from a guy in Thailand, broadcasting from his kitchen on YouTube. And although I could not understand a single word he was saying, an egg cracking in Thailand is the same as an egg cracking in the United States. My roommate's grandmother is best friends with a Danish woman that she met in an online global bridge playing community. They share pictures of their grandchildren with each other, and although they will probably never meet, these women are best friends. And I got over my fear of British children by watching Charlie bite his brother Sweeter on the internet. And the fact that you all know what I'm talking about just illustrates my point. And if you want a slightly more profound web-based experience, get online tonight, get on YouTube, and look up genocide, or Darfur, or witness child slavery in Haiti, or fighting in the Gaza Strip, or even get a glimpse in what life is like in North Korea, because even the most isolated country in the world still has representation on the web. And what's great about that is that this free dissemination of information creates transparency and accountability, not just between governments and people, but between one individual and another on a global basis. Because we are in a world that is so vast and filled with issues that are so complex that it is impossible for one person to fathom it all. And it's hard to know what to believe in when the media presents things in many different lights. But the internet recognizes that the world is not made up of politicians, or of celebrities, or of news anchors, but it is made of normal people like you and like me who are just struggling to make something of themselves. People who post their lives on YouTube and on Facebook and on the blogosphere, where their struggles have an equal opportunity to be heard. But the anonymity of the web, however, is showing us where our struggles have led us astray. It is giving rise to parts of society that we don't get to see typically in our everyday lives. For example, young girls on the internet join anorexia support groups in the blogosphere, where they receive support not to recover, but to push each other to look like the celebrities that they see on the web. Women whose images that have been so airbrushed and so photoshopped that it is impossible for any amount of starvation to achieve their image in the mirror. And soldiers from Iraq post their experiences on YouTube. They post videos that glorify killing by taking combat, live combat, and posting it on the internet to popular music. They call it war porn. And every example of it serves only to dehumanize and alienate the population of the world that our country currently most desperately needs to learn to talk to. See, free dissemination of information can create transparency, but it does not guarantee accountability. Without caution, we will continue to teach each other our mistakes, because the world is filled with very human problems that we try to correct with very technological solutions. We try to fix people with governments and weapons and rules and televisions and all sorts of consumer inventions. But it is my hope that the internet will finally allow us to present human solutions to human problems. For when the internet is such a pure conduit of communication that draws us together so seamlessly, so effortlessly, that the only thing at the other end of the line is a voice and not static, a person and not a statistic. I'll get my news from a neighbor and not from a news anchor. The internet is going to take Schrodinger's cat and put him in Pandora's box, shake him up till he gets good and mad, and then turn him loose. Let human curiosity on the wide web fuel human outrage at the wider world, and then we will see change. Because the human heart may not hear statistics, but it does hear voices, and it does see faces. And we will put a human face on every human problem with a human solution when our neighbors are not defined by geographic location or by color of skin or by creed, but by common interest and by common humanity. The internet is drawing tight the wire that connects us all. And when we're all standing shoulder to shoulder, we will no longer be able to ignore the problems that face humanity. The internet is going to let us all crash each other's parties. And when those without answers turn to look at us and say, "How did you know?" Do you know what we will say? We are the internet generation, and we want the world, and we want it delivered. Thank you for your time.